Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss, host of the program here on allpointstv.com. Program called What's Going On. We come on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon every Monday. And every second and fourth Monday, we proceed the program called Satura's Black History Corner that comes on at 3:30. And they normally stay around about 4 o'clock. This is the third Monday, so they'll be here next week. And we're looking forward to that. We're very glad, as always, to have you with us here at the studio at your own time. And today is a special day, as you know. This is Dr. Martin Luther King's annual birthday celebration that was put into existence in 1983 under President Reagan and was actually beginning to be observed 3 years later in 1986. So how many years would that be from that time until today? This is 2016. So this is the 30th anniversary of the official recognition of Dr. King's birthday. Today is 18th. Dr. King was born on January the 15th, 1929. And I had decided some time ago, and I had announced this over the last couple of months, that I was going to use this occasion to do something that was outside the norm. And I've been reading today about all the things they're going to be doing around the nation. There's a demonstration going to be taking place in South Carolina, for example, walking to the Capitol. And they don't have this issue again this year to take down the Confederate flag. So they'll be going there to say that the issue is not really finished yet. And that issue would be, I think what they'd be calling for today is to throw more money at a problem and the quote-unquote inequity in the funding of education in the rural area. They'll have something to complain about, whatever you do. But today, I think they'll be marching to get more resources thrown at a problem. And we have no history where that has ever been something that's ever worked. There's got to be some human investment, some human resource investment in whatever the problems are. And money, you're throwing money at it, probably that's the least effective way of resolving whatever you're trying to resolve. Anyway, around the nation, there'll be different celebrations, and there'll be a lot of persons that will be speaking at different centers. I understand that Donald Trump is speaking, for example, at Liberty University, and we'll see how that plays out. I would pretty much put my last dollar on the fact there'll be demonstrations there, because the idea is that Donald Trump, being a Republican and running even in that as an outsider, doesn't have the right to claim the mantle of Martin Luther King, because he's in the Republican Party, and he's a candidate for president in that domain. And it's like the Democrats claim that they have some right to monopoly on the image of Martin Luther King, as if they were not the ones who were the chief ones opposing what he was trying to do when he was here. I mean, go and get that from history. And yet the claim is that they're the ones that picked the mantle up, loved them all alone, and had no opposition to what he was trying to do in the southern states. And it's just interesting how those that are now claiming that they own that mantle, that anyone coming from the other party and would claim some custodianship of the legacy, they're outside the orbit and should stay within their particularly being encased in terms of over here is where you stand and over here is where everybody else stands. The ones that got the right view of things, they're over here on this side, over the left. Those on the right, you guys get out of here. I mean, this is quite amazing. And you know that Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat now, and all those Southern governors standing in the doorway of these schoolhouses, that King was trying to get them to move out of the way and have the equal application of the 14th Amendment to all the citizens. They've now got the person standing in the way, such as George Wallace of Alabama, Ross Barnett in Mississippi, Faubus in Georgia, and other Democrats. All of them at that point were Democrats because of the Solid South. And now, so posthumously, they've all changed parties, and now they were Republicans. And Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat. So Donald Trump speaking at Liberty University will get some opposition. I would imagine, although he had just as much right to speak in the domain of Dr. King's legacy as anyone else does. And when they had the meeting in 2010 in Washington, D.C., this was called, and the demonstration was called by Glenn Beck, and it was held on the 28th of August of 2010. Of all times, by the way, to have this on the day in which Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech, and to have Glenn Beck over there calling for this meeting, they just couldn't stomach that. And the fact that he had something like 500,000 people in that particular park right there in the image of Abraham Lincoln, standing purposely a couple of steps down from where King had stood when he gave his I Have a Dream speech on August the 28th, 1963. They couldn't, being respectful of the place where that speech was delivered, Glenn Beck stood down a couple of steps down below that, so as not to be seen as being condescending to where Dr. King stood. He could have stood right there as far as I was concerned. And I went there to pay witness to it. I was there in Washington at the time that particular gathering was called. And I will tell you something, having been at the March on Washington in 1963 and being in that particular gathering in 2010, I can tell you something, that gathering was at least equal to the size, and I think twice the size of what you had when King was giving his treatment, calling the nation to the best of its past and the best of its ideals, and calling to be better than that in terms of the application of those ideals. Well, when they had Glenn Beck up there calling for it, for a gathering on the 28th of August of 2010, that was just too much to stomach. And they had another march across town at the Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School that was called together by NAN, the National, the Black Action Network under Al Sharpton. They had about 3,000 folks over there, and I kept reading. I was there, so I was seeing these people marching down the street in protest, but they only had about 3,000 that were there. But I was watching how it was being covered in the press at that time, and the press was saying they had thousands at Sharpton's gathering. Yeah, and I was asking, okay, how many thousands? I mean, 2,000 is thousands. Any thousand over 1,000 is thousands. But they never told us how many thousands we're talking about. And in Glenn Beck's case, what they did was try to play down the numbers and try to act like that he only had something like, it had been a flop. It had been something like 25,000 or 50,000. It had been a flop at that point. But that man had people. You can go and look in fact, you can go and see the audience in 63 and then look at the audience in 2010 and just look at the pictures and just simply compare the two. And you can see there's more folks in that park under the Glenn Beck calling, because the nation was being called to embrace the vision of Dr. King. And if they're not embracing the vision, how do you explain Obama being president? I mean, how do you explain that Obama's the 44th president of the United States?
That's a point that I always bring up too. They, you have these people who say, the naysayers, like, not much has changed since the 1960s. And what? Okay, I mean,
still right.
And I think if you had back in the 80s, I think if you had offered, they had offered up somebody, the Democratic Party or anybody else other than Jesse Jackson for their candidate, I think they would have gone further. I mean, let's face it, nobody who I think, I've heard a lot of blacks, even in movies rag on Jesse Jackson. Chris Rock mocks him. So, I mean, it's not just something white folks are questioning what his role is and what his job is. I mean, so if they put up somebody else other than Jesse Jackson back in the 80s, he probably could have been elected earlier on.
Yeah, as one of my friends would say, he would say, holla. I don't think you should holla, but you're making a great point. You can't claim the country is racist because we've not had a black president. You're running people like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and the former senator over there in Illinois, I forget her name now. She's easy to forget. Just another Democrat.
Braun, isn't it? Braun.
Yeah. Braun was the last name. And you can't claim you're putting up candidates like this, and then when the country does not, in fact, embrace those candidates, that's an indication of racism. In fact, what they're doing right now, because of the absence of racism, what they're doing is making everything a racist act. They even getting involved. I said this in my article today before I came to the studio. They're getting involved in the water situation here in Flint. Just as Jackson was in town yesterday here in Flint. And now the oppression of blacks in the city is they're being oppressed by the water supply. And I wrote about that in my post before coming to the studio. And I'll tell you what I did with this post today. But all of us are custodians of the vision, because Dr. King said, and I want to quote one part of his speech that puts it in context. He said that he had a dream, and he said his dream was deeply rooted in the American dream. And so where would that be? Where would that dream be housed? That dream is housed in the nation's documents. And it's also talked about November the 19th, was it, in 1863, when Abraham Lincoln alluded to the vision when he said 77 years ago, the founders had this vision, and he said a nation conceived in liberty. And then he said something very profound and dedicated to the proposition. It didn't mean that we had accomplished it. It meant that it was dedicated to the proposition that all men were created equal, and it was up to each generation, therefore, to perfect the vision as we continue to work on it. The vision will never be complete, because every generation, there's a new generation born into existence, and they're taking their rightful place at the helm of society, and you got to then reinvigorate the vision with the ones who are now the custodians of the vision. So that task will never be complete. You are constantly renewing the custodians of the vision, and they have to be housed within the context of its fulfillment. So the job is never done. It's always going to be unraveled, because it's always going to be other persons taking the place of those who were the progenitors of it prior to their arrival on the scene. I don't think that's hard to understand. So anybody can go and have a claim of the vision of King, because King was claiming the vision of the founders. And that's all of us that are the custodians of that. And I wish somebody would be able to, as my friend would say, holler about that reality. But we're not really in our right minds in this country to a large extent. And we don't know how much we've been driven out of our minds, as I'm going to say. And when I get to the second thing I want to talk about today, which is this idea of the constitutional eligibility of a person running for the presidential office in 2016. I will have a lot to say about that in just a few minutes. But I wanted to talk, first of all, about what I did in terms of coming to prior to coming to the studio, and that was my article today. And I always think that when I've written an article that this was the best that I've written, and I guess I'm just so much imbued with being Mrs. Reed's student that I continue to celebrate what she allowed me to find out in her room. It wasn't that she really she taught English, but it wasn't so much that she it was also her instruction as well. But basically what it was, more than anything else, that got me to begin to embrace my writing talent is that she made me focus on it, made me look at it, because I just took it for granted that what I was doing was what I was doing. But I write in her name because she accused me one day in her class of having plagiarized somebody passed in a report that I did for her. We had to pass reports in every Friday. And I had done a report for myself, and also had written one for a guy. I don't think I should call his name. He's still alive, so I won't call his name. But let's see, A.D. He'll know who that is. And we were at Parker High School at the time in Birmingham, and I had written my paper, and I had written one for him. And he put his name on it, but he didn't read it. And he passed it in, and she read both of our papers. And she called us both up to the desk at the same time. She said to him first, she said, "I don't think y'all wrote these papers, and I want you to tell me what's in your paper." Well, this guy was so lacking in academics that he didn't even read the paper before he passed it in, just simply put his name on and pass it in. And when he was asked to tell the teacher what was in the paper, he stumbled through it, didn't know anything was in the paper, and couldn't say anything about it. She told him to go to his seat. She said, "Sit down, you didn't write this. Sit down." And then she turned to me and she said, "Now, Moss, what is in your paper?" And I told her what was in the paper. I got into about a minute of it and discussing what had been written. And she told me to be quiet. She said, "Yeah." She said, "You wrote it. Go sit down." And I went back to my seat and sat down. And I could have gone back. And I tell the story. I used to tell the story a lot to my students because I wanted to show them how to navigate through these potential minefields without injuring yourself, and understand the larger issues involved in it, and then claim that which is positive in it. If there's an accusation, there's something that is in the accusation you can claim hold to and extract the victory out of it. And so when I went back to my seat after being told to go sit down after the accusation, I went back to my seat. It was about 15 minutes in the class period before the bell was going to sound. And I will never forget that day as long as I live. I went back to my seat, and I was practically, as I walked back to my seat, going to the back of the room where I sat. And I sat in the back of the room not to avoid the teachers calling on me for any of the answers. I had read my lessons, and I was really prepared in those classes. But I went back in the back of my seat because I was the worst dressed person in the classroom. So I was kind of back there, hiding out, that I didn't have what they had. But so I went back to the back of the room where I was sitting. But in going back to the back of the room, I was practically floating back there to my seat. And as I sat back down with about 15 minutes left to go in the hour before the bell sounded, I sat back in my seat in that room, and I was absolutely sitting there in awe of myself because I had not embraced that talent that I had in writing, but I was able to write because I was reading all the time. And I had embraced the writing of the readers, had embraced the writing of the authors that I had read. If you reading is really the flip side of writing. And if you learn how they wrote their sentences while you're reading what they wrote, you're learning how to write yourself. That's why readers are better writers than those who don't read. And a lot of people out there who are not writers, and I find a lot of them on posts like I read a lot of Facebook posts. I read everything on Facebook. That's on that one wall that we all share, that we have common, friendship on Facebook, that put those persons on the wall. I read all of them. At least one time during the day, I stroll through them and read them. And I read particularly those who come into my wall because I want to see what they're saying, so that when they come on my wall to comment, I want to be able to know some of the things about what they're writing on their wall. I try to show some respect in that regard. But anyway, what Ms. Reed did was get me to embrace a talent that I had, because I did read a lot, even in elementary school. And I read a lot of things that were not on the elementary level. I read the Reader's Digest condensed copies of the 3 classic works written by James Weldon Johnson, W.B. Du Bois, and Booker T. Washington. I read that in elementary school. And I had read Up from Slavery, which was Booker T. Washington's classic work. I read that in elementary school. So but I didn't embrace what that had taught me, because I wasn't really aware of it. I just simply did it. It was just something that you did. You wrote a paper, you pass it in. But when she made the accusation that I had copied that particular report, in that accusation, I went back from the accusation from her desk back to my desk, and I sat down, and with 15 minutes left, I said to myself, wow. I said to myself, I'm just doing self-talk. I'm not moving my lips. I'm having a conversation in my own mind. And I said to myself, in that classroom, I'm pretty good. And I knew it then and didn't know it in the past. And the reason why I knew it then was because of my respect for the accuser. I had a lot of respect for Mrs. Reed. And I knew she was a caring teacher, but she was one of those persons that nailed down those boards, and she would tell you she loved you, but there was no way you getting around any of your responsibilities as a student in the classroom, and I respected that. And that's the kind of person I tried to be when I was in the classroom. Not always to applause, but I wouldn't tolerate that nonsense, and that talking back was forbidden. And they'll tell you that today. I mean, I would say be quiet. They would say all right, and I tell them to shut up. And they say okay, and I tell them to shut up again. And the kids would say, Mr. Moss, why are you telling them to shut up? And all they're doing is saying okay. I say, because I don't care if it's okay. when I tell somebody to turn around, that is not a verbal, lies, a response that needed a verbalized, there's not a verbalized statement or needed a verbalized response. Turning around is a physical, observable phenomenon. And I don't need to hear any noise about it. I just need to see you complying with it. And okay and all right was, to me, a sign of non-compliance. And in fact, a certain sign of hidden aggression. And they'd ask me, what do you mean by that? And I would tell them what I meant by it, because I meant something very specific about it. Because I had been told to turn around when I was in school, and I just turned around. So I understood what the noise was about. And what the noise was about was that they're saying okay and all right because they're saying to you in a very indirect way that they're only going to comply because they agree with the request. What I was saying in return back to them was that your compliance, your agreement with the request has nothing to do with the compliance. The compliance is based upon me telling you what to do. Because I'm in charge of the classroom and you're not. And I wanted that to be understood from Jump Street. Okay, so anyway, Mrs. Reed. It's all about Mrs. Reed, and it's all about her acquisition. I sat back there in that classroom 15 minutes. I was in awe of the acquisition. Now, I could have gotten mad and said she falsely accused me and I did this, that, and other. But the acquisition told me something. It taught me. And I went back there with that acquisition in my mind, and I was trying to figure out what it meant. And what it meant was what I concluded, that I'm pretty good. And I have been writing in her name ever since. And I wrote this article today in her name. I had to stop to come to the studio. I wasn't really quite finished with it, but I had made all the main points I wanted to make. And that article on King's birthday is what I said I was going to do several weeks ago, probably as far back as 2 months ago when I was thinking about it, because I was thinking about what would I do on King's birthday this year. And what I decided to do on King's birthday this year was use Dr. King's birthday to call for the resignation of Barack Obama as President of the United States. And I did so knowing the criticism that would be forthcoming, and that's why I put in the context of the narrative a preemptive shut up. Because all of the ones who be coming with some objections to it, I have to tell you something, they're not qualified. That's just a fact. And that's why I don't take them seriously when they get on my wall. I mean, this is comical to me that they think they get on my wall and slam me down because they object. And I think these persons are fools because some of them, and they really do believe this, they believe the objection is an argument. Because they disagree with it, then the disagreement is an argument that is wrong. And that's why they don't put the information up there to counteract the information I'm putting up there. I can't take these people seriously. And be honest with you, if they even wrote an information down there, I'm going to be able to respond to it because they're not ready. They think that they are. They're not. Some of my former students get into that. They were taught, now they want to teach me. They can't do that. Because what they learned at that time, I didn't stop there. And some of them get on the wall. And they actually believe that they can teach me today. They can't do it. They're not ready. And I can call one person out in particular. He's not ready. He thinks he is because he's now teaching school himself. He's not ready. And he'll never be ready. Because that's one thing I give Donald Trump credit for. You know, he talks about something that we need to pay attention to. He said the other day in the debate that there's something that he wants to give the country. He's basically about the fact he built all these. He's built a great company, and he said whatever that he has, he wants to share that on a much more grandeur, level. I mean, that's something that Donald Trump has that these other guys don't have. And that's very clear in terms of what they talk about. When they start talking about what they're going to do with China and the trade and all, they haven't done the trade. This man was able to get to do that. And they don't have that. These guys are talking about the theoreticals.
You bring up a point that I think is applicable here on the county level. I mean, I don't want to discourage anybody from being politically involved in their local government. But if you look at the water situation here, basically anybody could run for city office, city council. And what experience do they bring to the table? When you extrapolate that and extend that to the national stage, most of the people are lawyers, which means they're specific and knowing what they can get away with. But basically, they don't know how things are going to run when they get there. They don't. I know I had an economics professor at college just a few years ago. He said, I know about trending, I know about this, I know about that. He said, the thing is the reason why I'm not a millionaire for us, he said, I don't have the full knowledge to know when I could do this or that, or when I should do this or I should do that. He said, that's the reason why I'm not a multimillionaire. He said, but I know he said, I know how things work, but I don't know where to tweak this or to do this. And he said, if anybody does do that, that's why they can make some money. He said, or they get enough political control, they can actually funnel things in their direction. So he said, and that's what it is. Politically, people don't have the expertise. They don't have any knowledge base. They're well-intended, for their certain group that they're allegedly representing. But they have no expertise. I think we should demand more. I mean, I think it basically comes down to more that we should demand more. Yeah. More on a personal scale. Yes, I think personal integrity does matter. Yeah. I think a person who could lie to his wife, like in case Bill Clinton, and cheat on her all the time. I think if they think about it, if they can do that, somebody they know can actually have to see face to face, eye to eye contact. Just think how blithely and how nonchalantly they can betray the rest of us. So I think it does matter. I think personal integrity does matter in office. Yes. And I think all these other issues matter. So I'm sorry to side point, but John, I think you made a good point.
But you're making a great point in terms of the water issue. They want to blame the reason why they're jumping into it, by the way, is because they've got to rev up and get some issue they can run with that will ignite the black voting base. They don't care anything about the fact that the water issue is in the city of Flint. Although Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and now Jesse Jackson came into the city yesterday, and he's talking about it. They don't care anything about that. They're trying to rev up the black vote, and they don't have any issue they can run with that's going to excite the black community to get out there and vote for Hillary Clinton or whoever the standard bearer is for the Democratic Party, and they can't do that, so they got to rev up some support. So now blacks are being oppressed by the water supply, and they're going to blame Snyder, the Republican governor of Michigan, for the problem that they're having when this problem was incubated over the last 50-some-odd years by the policy set in place by the members of the Democratic Party. And his Democratic Party squawking about it.
Yes, that's one thing. I mean, at some point, I'm not like a stellar, intelligent person, but I've sit around the house and I say, okay, last year I got a new roof put on. And I plan, a few years down the road, I might have to have this looked at, or could actually say I had a water tank installed like 5 years ago. Normally they're good for 20 years, but, with the sediment and stuff like that could go quicker. Right. All right, so I'm looking down the road and say, well, can I have to plan? Can I shove some money aside? What should I do? City council, basically, they're just caught up. I mean, when we still had money coming in, somebody should have said, we got money coming in. We know where the GM's exiting. We should take some of this money and do something with it that's going to actually make it more encouraging to bring people in. But nobody even thought of this. No. To my opinion, I can't remember anybody bringing this up until it becomes critical. And I think that every so many years, they should have, when the money was still coming in, they should have replaced certain sections of the infrastructure.
No question.
And they didn't do it.
They didn't do it.
And it's I've heard a personal story one time where a person, as a friend of mine, working at an economic development group, she was working here temporarily. She went to this, they found out GM had a piece of property they could offer maybe a possible company to come in to take it. GM could donate it. Well, then Mayor Stanley, he overheard their plans to request this from GM. He said, oh, no, don't ask that because I want to ask them for $40,000 for my fireworks display. Yeah. What's more important, long-term economic development or 2 days of oohing and ahhing at fireworks? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, John, you're making an excellent point. Looking down the road, when things are going well, and you don't have all of the baggage that you have right now, for example, politicians are very good at this. If they have any kind of assets that they're not using, they feel they have to use it. They don't think about the rainy day fund. And when they get into a quagmire, as the city is right now, and they cannot bail itself out, they want to then blame the president office holder as having caused a problem because the problem is current. But the problem has been incubated over a period of time. And I've looked at the budget, by the way, of the city of Flint. I asked for the budget from one of the members that was on the city council at that time that is now in another post because they jump around from one political post to another. But I asked him I want to look at the budget. And what jumped off the page at me as I was studying the budget and looking at where the money is going, 17 to 25% of it, which is then between 17 cents of a quarter of a dollar, every dollar of taxes goes toward legacy costs. And when you have a quarter of your budget comes off the top to pay for that that was done in the past, and you're paying for the cost of decisions made that's not made in the present, you can blame the present office holder on it, but it's really something that happened before they got there. And politicians, this is what John is saying, the politicians are very good about that. What the politicians do is that they are the greatest postponers and the greatest procrastinators on the planet. What they do is that they simply do things that will keep them in power while they're the ones running for office. They leave the other things, the legacy costs, off to the ones who will be coming after them and coming to solve the problem that they did not solve, but the ones they created. And that's what's happening right here with the water supply. This didn't happen overnight. This happened because there were some things that were not done in the past for which we're paying for it right now. There's always a classic example with politicians, by the way, that chickens come home to roost. And these are some more of those chickens that have come home to roost. And the Republicans are now in the governorship, and they're taking all of the hits from those persons that were in the custodialship in the past. And I want you to notice something else while we're on this point. And that is, you notice that there is never any receivership in the places where the Republican Party is located. As in the state of Michigan, have you seen any cities that has to be taken over and have managers in there where the Republican Party has been in the custodialship? I'm not promoting the Republican Party. I'm just simply telling you that the history of it is that you have problems in the Saginaw's and the Flints and the Detroits, in those places, but you don't have it in Grand Blanc and Davison and Kersley and Clio and Flushing, in those places. And why is that? It's because of the managerial difference that takes place. And the legacy cost that's put in place because they're not throwing all taxpayers' money at these entitlements that they're getting in order to gain power. That doesn't happen under the custodialship. And I for one am not for bailing people out when they make political decisions. The cost of which comes home at some point to roost, and they must pay for the burden that they caused upon themselves. I'm very hard in that domain because I'm from that school of you make your bed, you lay in it so that you can make better decisions in the future. I mean, look at California that has learned nothing. They just keep making the same ones over again, $19 billion of debt. So what did they learn? Nothing, because so many people come in and did rescue, and then they have no incentive to change because they can continue down the liberal road to Armageddon because somebody else is paying the price of the decisions that they're making. That's the wrong way to go. I mean, I learned that as a child. So I understand the political, part of the problem, but the solution is not what they are applying right now. The solution is a call for people who are inept today in the roles they're playing, such as Obama, to stop all this marching, which they're doing today, for example, and let's get around to calling for the ending of the problem that's being caused in our time period. And I'm calling for the ending of the problem in my time period by using this day to call for Obama's resignation. And I did it without any equivocation, and I did it without hesitation nor any qualms about it, because I'm not concerned about the fallout. Because those who will be objecting to it, and I expect the objection, I'm ready for it and prepared to deal with it once it comes about on that post. Because I can tell you right now, there's not a person in this country that's qualified to challenge anything that I said today on that post. And I wish they tried. I mean, I want the scholars to do it, because I tell you, you lightweights, no, you need to let them do it. And they won't do it. It's not that they're not aware of it. And I know they're aware of it by the fact that I was the one 2 years ago. John can verify this, because I talked about it on the air, but I also talked about it in my Facebook post. I wrote before Mark Levine wrote his book, The Liberty Amendments. I'm going to say something about what they're doing right now with this constitutional question that none of them have been able to understand. They don't know what they're talking about. They think that they do. I'm going to show that they don't. And that includes the great one, Mark Levine, who is great. no doubt about it. But even Mark Levine has a blind spot on the question of eligibility, and I'm going to show that before we get off the air today. I'm going to show you where he got off too, because they don't have it. But 6 months before Mark Levine's book came out called The Liberty Amendments, I sent them a copy of what I had written on Facebook, and it was 6 months before the book came out. I don't know if it was it had any resignation or not, any resonance rather or not in what they did later on with it. But I did see the governor in Texas getting on this boat, and I saw that Mark Levine wrote a book about it. 6 months before he did that, I had sent him a copy of that particular post that I did. I don't know what he did with it. I'm not making any claims because I don't have any information about what that effect was. But I was saying at that time that it would resonate in a much wider arena. People writing me on Facebook and saying, "Oh, George, you can't do that," and it's not going to happen as a result of it. Well, right now I'm a part of the COS, the Convention of States, and that's what's going on underground, the rumblings of which you don't hear. But I'm one of the local directors appointed to this post, and so this is going on, rumblings underground right now. I'm waiting until it surfaces, because we're gonna make some noise out here, and I can guarantee. But Mark Levine was the national person that took a hold of it. He got a microphone I don't have. We have one here, but it's not the microphone. It's not a megaphone. It's a microphone. He has a megaphone, and now it's getting off the ground. But it's a matter of record that I talked about this 6 months before that book came out. That's just a matter of record. You can go back and read it on Facebook. So we got to use these occasions that we have to speak to the public, even if it doesn't do anything. And I don't think, I know, John and I were saying this before it came on the air, Obama's not going to resign because I'm calling for his resignation today on King's birthday. That's not going to happen. But that's not the intent of it. My intent is to put it out there in the public domain for public discourse, so we can at least have another view of it, and we can talk about something concrete, rather than walking around here talking about taking down the flag, Confederate flag, and there's one person on the college campus, somebody showed her the flag and she just broke down in tears. She couldn't stand it. Somebody either burp her on their shoulder. There's only one president of the universities that I've seen, and they're not very many of them, but there's one president of the university, when they were over here breaking down and crying, and they just couldn't stand the pressure of having seen the flag. This one president did come out and say, and I give him a lot of credit, he said that we're not running a daycare center here, this is a university. And we're supposed to be talking at the university level about ideas on all levels, even those ideas that are unpalatable to what we believe in and what we've accepted as true. Aren't we supposed to be able to engage in are there some adults in the room in these classrooms today? In front of the classroom, are there any adults? Because it's about as bad as their students. And so they're just breaking down, can't hardly stand it, having some ideas that they disagree with, and they got to be nailed down because we don't agree with that. And so what are we talking about that for? We're supposed to be over here. And these ideas are unpalatable. These ideas are fine. And First Amendment be damned. Don't want to hear that. Well, I'm doing something that's unpalatable today on King's birthday. I'm not for any marching. We marched enough already, and the only people benefiting from that are the ones who are following in the footsteps of Jan Masseliger, who was the one that invented the shoe-lasting machine. You may remember him, one of the inventors, and made Massachusetts the shoe capital of the world because of that invention. Jan Masseliger having caused that. So if you are one of the person got some stock in the company, okay, continue to cultivate the idea of people ought to march. But if you're not one of the person benefiting from that march, don't get it. We marched enough already. It's time to sit down and do some clear thinking about what needs to go on from here. And one thing we don't need to go on from here is keep fighting this civil rights battle over and over again, because that duck is already dead. This is not even a lame duck. This is a dead duck. Because that discussion is over. We've already resolved that problem. And you can claim what you want to about it. But I would tell all you people out there in these groups like Black Lives Matter and all these other numbskull groups you got set up, if you had a problem that you were dealing with, you wouldn't have to keep making this stuff up, which is exactly what you're doing. You can say, for example, I know over there, the police officer didn't have to shoot this guy, Laquan Donald, 16 times, and I agree with you on that. But Laquan McDonald, is it McDonald or Donald? Laquan Donald didn't have to have that knife in his hand either. And at what point in time does the knife come into the conversation? So far, it hasn't come into the conversation. He's just out there, just walking down the street, hands in his pocket, not posing a threat to anybody, and the police department had no right to stop him. This man got a weapon in his hand, walking down the middle of the street with it, and had already used that weapon to slash the police officer's tires. This man poses a threat, and he has to be stopped. Now you can go. Now the bullet counters come in. They want to talk about how many bullets were fired. Shut up. Let's talk about the other part of it. He was stopped. Now, the excessive force is an issue also, but it's not the only issue, you tackheads. But you make it the only issue because you don't want to get to the other thing that will save the next person from being shot, because you want shooting as a way of maintaining your relevance. If you really were trying to help anybody, you would talk about the other issues so that the next person can make a better decision so that the shooting will not occur. But you're not going to do that. Yeah, I'm talking about you because you're the problem. And you are keeping this dialogue going and making this stuff up out of whole cloth. I'm not for anybody getting shot beyond the means of stopping the problem. But one shot can kill you. And 16 certainly is excessive, particularly when the person is down. But you know what happens there? You can say all you want about race. I took psychology and I have a minor in psychology. I have a lot of minors because I stayed in school. I took more hours than what was necessary. And I will tell you this: once you start something and that, because you're not really trained to kill. We're not really trained to kill our own species. And so to do that, a certain psychosis kicks in. Because, animals are not trained to kill their species either unless there's for proprietary cause. I mean, you may have the lion killing the cubs because he wants to procreate and have his progenitors, pass down through his seed and not through the seed of the other lion that was there first. So he may kill the cubs in order for the female lion to want to reproduce again. As long as she got those cubs, she's gonna take care of those cubs as a self-preservation issue in her genre. So that you may have that go on, but he's not trying to eliminate the species. He's trying to plant what he feels is the strongest seed so the species can in fact survive based upon the progenitors that he's actually producing. That's what that is about. But no species is supposed to eliminate itself. So when you see a person out there shooting on the street, because we're not made and built, we're not built to break, because we were told that by Whitney Houston. But we're not built to kill either, our own species. And so when that happens and you start to do that, then you have to be out of your mind to an extent in a certain psychotic state. So you start to shoot as this person was doing, then the firing, because you go into another part of a point of dementia, a certain point of mental dementia, and you continue to fire because that is an abnormal act that you engaged in. I mean, why do you think these persons come back from the wars and they're all tattered and torn and they are psychotic and out of their minds and they cannot reconcile what they did with who they are? Because who they are is not what the Army turned them into. That's why that goes on. So I understand the continuation of the act. I don't condone it, and you have to have a consequence of it, but let's understand that this is not about race. Anybody that run, I would say what this one lady said in this one post she did on YouTube. Her post is called "Honestly Speaking," and I wish she posts a lot more because she makes the sense that Al Sharpton doesn't make, and Jesse Jackson doesn't make, and Michael Eric Dyson doesn't make, and Cornel West doesn't make, and none of those guys on the left make, because they're all nutcases. They don't have anything. And they better not get on any of my posts. I dare them to get on there, because it'll be embarrassing to them, because I don't take any prisoners. You have to be, so you see, and honestly speaking, she raised the question, why are you running? I mean, the guy that ran in, was it in South Carolina? I think it was in South Carolina where this guy was in the car. He was stopped. Nothing happened so far. But he gets out of the car and starts running, and the police officer, gets into another thinking channel. And the guy's running. He sees the guy running. He don't know where he's running to. He doesn't ask the question what he's running from. And he doesn't come into what danger he poses. Certainly didn't pose a danger to the police officer, but the problem they make there is saying Laquan McDonald, I think his name is, either Donald or McDonald, they say, well, he wasn't posing a threat to police officers. Well, let me tell you something about that. The police officer's job is not just to stop the threat that's posed to the police officer. Can you understand that? Well, if you can understand that, then you can understand his job is not just to stop any threat that's posed to him. Yeah, he had turned away from the police officer, but in turning away from the police officers that were standing over here, he turned towards some other folks that were over there, or in the direction in which he was heading. That has to be stopped too. But I give the bullet counters the fact that the amount of force that was used was excessive, and that should be what the officer, answers for. But don't come telling me about racism, because that's not what this is about. And honestly speaking, I give her credit, because she raised a question. She asked a question, which they won't, which BLM, the Black Lives Matter, won't raise, and they just, why are you running? And why have they mentioned that in terms of that was a provocation, not for the things that happened, but it's a provocative act. And because you don't know what will happen, then you don't run. Can you understand that? I mean, I'm not talking about chemistry here. I mean, if I was talking about chemistry, it'd be a whole different conversation. This is not chemistry. It's just not. But why aren't they mentioning that? You know why? Because they don't want the problem to be resolved. And when there is no problem, they make a problem up and then fight that, which comes out of their own imagination. Now, they'll stay hidden as far as what I'm saying, because they don't want to be exposed. And that, I'll tell you what, I know they read my posts, because I see what they write in, I see what they write in private. I say, I get some chats on the private site, and they'll be quoting somebody that said something to them, and they'll come and put it on my wall as if I'm supposed to respond to the one that told to them. I don't respond to those told to them. I respond to the one put on my wall, because I don't know what the other person they're talking about said, because I can't verify that. They want me to jump off and start and fight these people. I can give you some names, but fight them, because they know they can't handle the conversation. So they want me to get me on over there to talk about this other person. But I don't do that, because I don't know it on my own. If they get on my wall and say it, then I do know it, based upon it coming out of the horse's mouth. But they're not going to do that, because they don't have any integrity. And they better not do it, because they're not qualified. They may think that they are, they're not. So that's a done deal there. Now, I got to say something. I want you to read that post. I always say that. I always say when I write a post, I say that's my best one. But, Mrs. Reed, I have to tell you something posthumously, that I try not to write in the bad posts, because I'm writing in the name of a person that allowed me to find my skill. I have to respect that. And I try not to write junk. Unless I'm really pressed for time. I proofread everything before I post it, but sometimes I'm stressed for time, because I'm running to different obligations, and I don't necessarily have to. I have to do the proof later on. And then sometimes when I post it, and then I try to do the proof and reading, and once it's posted, people have already commented on the post. And so what happens is that while I'm doing the editing, going back through it again after it's been posted, trying to put it up online so that it'll get up there as early as possible, then while people are sharing it, I'm at the point of editing at the same time. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll be editing, and then when I get to a point that I made some error that I want to correct, maybe the wording is not what I wanted, while I'm editing it, I have to go and then post that and get that back up there with that particular editing in it, because while I'm editing it, people are posting it. and I want them to post it with the corrections. I then go back and repost it again and continue to read it and continue the editing as I go down further into the narrative. And I do it that way because I want to edit it, but I don't want them editing I don't want them posting what I edited that is not on the post yet. So I keep posting as I'm going through the editing and changing some things around because I want it to be at its best. And I do that in Mrs. Reed's name because I have so much respect for what she taught in her 12th grade class. And I did apologize to Dr. King today in my post because I did a couple of my shut-ups. And, I wanted to do preemption here, and I was preemptively saying shut up because I know people get on my wall and want to make these accusations, and I want to tell them to shut up ahead of time because if they and some of them have understood that they can't do that and get away with it because I'm not one of those persons taking the prisoners. I just don't. I have no tolerance for fools, and I will not let them come in my space without a challenge. I don't care who they are. And that's been my problem, I guess, all my life because I've been doing that with even the authorities over me and even the superintendent of schools I've been under who told me what I was going to do in my classroom. And I told them that's not going to happen in my classroom. And I said that even at the very beginning of my career. And it was not going to happen because what I knew is what I knew, and what I knew they didn't know. And I was not going to let them order me and lecture to me about going there doing that teaching that nonsense. That was not going to happen. So, and I'll be honest, I was shocked that I was able to retire because I'm just shocked even at it now. Okay, look, I got to see. So read the post. That's the idea. Read the post. The other thing I need to talk about is the post that I postponed. I did part 1 yesterday, and I told them I was going to do part 2 on Tuesday, and that is the post that said that neither Ted Cruz nor Marco Rubio are qualified and eligible to run for President of the United States based upon the Constitution. Now, those of you that were saying that you wanted to find out the eligibility of Obama because you wanted to find out where Obama was born, and that was an issue. It was an issue, and once we were able to find out he had been born in Hawaii, it stopped being an issue, although all of us knew that Obama's mother was from the United States at the time in which he was born. Otherwise, if he's born in Hawaii and the mom was absent, then how would that be the case since she had the child? So they knew that Obama's mother was American, and once they knew he was in Hawaii, then he became eligible for the presidency because he's a natural-born citizen. You see, they don't just claim to be the President of the United States that you have to be born as a citizen. You have to be a natural-born citizen, and there's a difference between the two. Now, I want all these experts to pay attention here because I want you to understand something that you're missing because you're a bunch of tackheads. You don't know that you are, but you are, and that's all those scholars at Columbia University, Harvard University, and all those coming upon this particular realm. None of you know what you're talking about. Let me tell you where you're making your mistake. Part of it is going back to, let me see where I should start this because it's a lot of different things going on that are countervailing upon each other. Let me just go back to what you did in terms of going back to the statute of 1790, where the framers realized that in terms of setting the requirements for what is found in Article 2, don't tell me, and what is found in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. That's where it is in terms of the fifth clause of Article 2, Section 1, the fifth clause in that article and section, which deals with the requirements for being President of the United States, the eligibility of the President of the United States. It says that the President must be a natural-born citizen. It doesn't just say born a citizen, but a natural-born citizen. I want you to look at the modifier that is there. Now, in 1790, which is 2 years after the Constitution had been ratified in 1788 by the framers that had in fact conjured up the document in 1787, but to understand the process in which you in fact amend that which is in fact convened at that convention. That is that after they propose it, it has to be placed before the states. Don't forget the states involved. The states are involved in its ratification. Now I want you to hold that point because I want to come back to it and make a point off of what that means because they missed that as well. Mark Levine has missed this. And I want to help him with his clarity on this point because it's fundamental to why they're making a mistake. Well, in 1790, 2 years after the ratification of the Constitution and 1 year before they began to add the amendments to the Constitution, every one of which has been proposed by the Congress and then submitted to the states involved in it again. The ones who proposed the convention, the ratification of the Constitution at the convention, the ones that proposed the amendments to the Constitution, they are not the ones that ratified the proposed Constitution or the amendments to the Constitution. The proposals are different from the ones that ratified. The states have to endorse it. And we've had every one of the 27 amendments, 10 of which were amended at one time, then 17 others that came afterwards as independent amendments, would be what has happened therein. But don't forget, we have two different persons involved, two different institutional ingredients involved in the final approval of that which has been proposed. The proposal is one part of it. In another arena, there is a ratification, the check and balance system inside even of the amendment process. So in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, it says that there will be these requirements for President of the United States. And it doesn't just say born citizen, it says a natural born citizen of the United States. So we have to look at the modifier that is found there in terms of what the word is, natural born. Now let me go offshore just for a minute and talk about Ted Cruz. And I want you to relate back to the issue that was raised about Obama's birth, although we knew his mother was president. John, we getting close to the end? Okay, I got to rush through it. I can do this in 3 minutes. Now, when they were objecting to Obama, but not and trying to find out, but it's no longer an issue with Cruz. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the partisan politics in terms of one person you support over here, but you don't support the person over there, so that the principle and the applicability of the principle no longer applies. See, to me, the principle applies in both cases. And so therefore, looking at where Ted Cruz was born, he was born in Calgary, Canada, that right there is a disqualifier. I will tell you why in just a minute, but let me go to also with Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio was born in the United States. He was born in Florida. But at the time of his birth, his parents, who were both from Cuba, did not become citizens of the United States for 4 years thereafter, beyond the birth of Marco Rubio, and that disqualifies Marco Rubio. Now let me tell you why in both cases that is true. It's true in the case of Ted Cruz, because here is a deal with Ted Cruz. The deal is that even though both of his parents are born in outside the country, and both of them are the mother was a citizen of the United States. The question is he natural born by being born in Canada? And the answer is no. Let me tell you why. In Amendment 14, it says that all persons born are naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. And if you notice it, all persons that are naturalized or natural born must be attached to the soil. So I will make this claim right here then. No person born outside the country is born a citizen of the United States. If they stay outside the United States all their life, they never become citizens. They must at some point attach themselves to one of the states in the United States. And if they never do that, even though their parents are citizens, never become citizens. Now, the potentiality is there for naturalization, but it only is going to be act upon and become a fait accompli once they're inside the country. And it cannot be born on Air Force bases or ambassadors or all the other. And if I had more time, I'd go into that as well. I'll finish this up next week when we have more time. But in that, I will be showing you that all of the ones that are discussing this issue are wrong, and I'm going to tell you why they're wrong. And it has to be with them going back consulting the intent. The intent doesn't matter. I mean, what's intended by the proposal? Well, you see that it doesn't matter because the ones that propose it are the ones that ratify it, and you cannot ratify intent. If the same ones, that's only relevant if the same ones that propose it had an intent and they're the ones that ratify it, knowing what the intent is, then that's relevant. But it's not relevant because the ones that actually ratify the proposal are different from the ones that propose it, and they did not send the intent in their head down to the states. Is what they put in writing. And that's what's ratified. So that conversation is, in fact, irrelevant, totally. Okay, I need to finish this up next week. We have too much to talk about today because of the King holiday. Hope you read the post. And, of course, we also here at the studio always hope you will follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.